Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good lunch. Now we're going to move off of Manhattan into some of the gateway markets, which are, there's lots and lots going on in these markets as well. They're very vibrant. So the first one we're going to talk about is Brooklyn to Long Island. And we have Eva Kramer and William Haynes to tell us about that. So Eva, why don't you get us started and tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, you are just like one of the leaders, the first to try in life sciences in New York City, honestly, right?
Yes.
And you've been at it for like 20 years now. We were just talking about how long it's been. But Brooklyn is really, you know, coming alive, and you've done so much down at SUNY Downstate and Biotek. Tell us all about it.
I'm happy to do it. Can we have the first slide, please?
Sure.
Hi. So my name is Eva Kramer, and I'm president of the Downstate Biotech Incubator, Tech at 710, and Biotech. And I just want to tell you that biotech is really growing in Brooklyn. So as Nancy said, we met a long time ago, and she came down from Boston when we were first beginning, and it was really nice to meet her. Can I have the next slide, please? So this shows you some pictures of the 3 different sites. On the left, you see the Downstate Biotech Incubator, and in the middle, you see Tech at 710. They're both close, very close to the university, the medical center. And they're both for early stage companies. The incubator is about 50,000 square feet, and the specialized Tech at 710 has very specialized chemistry facilities and is about 13,000 square feet. Both sites have BSL-2 level labs and office space. They both have core facilities and conference space. The incubator has some nursery space for companies that may want to share some space, but most of our companies like to have privacy and want their own lab space. The chemistry space, as you can see, has 26 fume hoods, and so it attracts companies that are into chemistry. On the right, you see Biotech at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. It is for companies that have outgrown the incubator, and Tech at 710. Biotech sits on the grounds of the Brooklyn Army Terminal, which is 97 acres of land right on the waterfront. And we have about 200,000 square feet at the southern end of Building A, which is the building next to the water. We also have about 38,000 square feet at the northern end of Building A that houses the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative and a number of other small companies. One of the small companies, Biotech, is here today, and so you should go visit them. This is a partnership between the Research Foundation of SUNY on behalf of Downstate Medical Center and the New York City EDC. We have just received a $50 million grant from the Life Science New York City investment, and we will be using it to build out additional space at Biotech. All 3 sites are part of Startup New York, which means they're tax-free zones, which means that the companies and their employees do not pay city and state taxes, which is a tremendous advantage to the companies. All of the companies have access to university resources. This includes working with our scientists, clinicians, and students. So for example, 3 of our students received their PhD with the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative in vaccine development. It's a wonderful advantage to our students and to our companies. The companies all have access to our medical and scientific library. Downstate has a fantastic 2-floor vivarium with everything from mice to non-human primates. A number of our companies make use of the facility. They also have access to research facilities that are at the medical school and are able to do clinical trials with our clinicians. We have a terrific entrepreneurship program, and I think you may have heard from Mary Howard, who runs our program. She's fantastic. I'm sure most of you know her. And she runs a wonderful program called the Next Milestone Program for our companies at all three sites. Our companies have easy access to other research institutions in the city. And for instance, if you're at Biobat and you like to take the ferry, you can go from our dock all the way to Lower Manhattan. At Biobat, actually on Monday, our Region Lab is about to have a ribbon cutting. They've just opening their new GMP facility. So what we're seeing a lot of, especially at Biobat, although we have a GMP facility at the incubator, that many of our companies are moving to the level of doing GMP manufacturing. Can I have the next slide, please? So I just like to brag about our companies. This just, as part of Startup New York, we're required to every year tell them, the state, how well our companies are doing. And this just represents 1 year, the last year from April 2020 to the end of March 2021. And so just in that time period, we have 35 companies. They have provided 343 jobs. They increased their revenues by over $64 million. They have received or filed for over 40 patents. And from federal and non-federal funds, they have received over $195 million. So we are very proud of them, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Wow, that's quite a class of companies there. You've got quite a lot of different kinds of companies, right? Yes. You've got some in synthetic biology like AlgaeKnit. I remember AlgaeKnit going through the Biodesign Challenge. Mm-hmm. This was a company that was a group of students that came out of the Feinstein Institute of Technology, if you can believe it or not. And they competed in this competition that a colleague of mine founded called the Biodesign Challenge, which we hold the international competition every year at MoMA in June. And they won the first year. And they created a thread made of algae. So they could literally knit a fabric using seaweed. And it's sustainable, right? And now they have founded a company, raised several $1 million to commercialize the product, and they're living at Biobat. So that's kind of how these things happen. So that's very, very exciting. Okay, so let's move into find out what's going on at Stony Brook and Long Island.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I have some slides that can come up. There's no way I'm going to be able to cover everything, so I think these slides will be available afterwards, so you can go through them at your will. And if you want to contact me or anyone else on the list, there's a contact page there too. So Long Island, we're big. We're spread out. We have 4 major research institutes, and we have 2 incubators. I think if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so we're spread all over the place. So I work at the Center for Biotechnology, which is housed at Stony Brook University. But we go all the way from the west side with Feinstein Institute for the Feinstein Institutes for Medical Research. That's part of Northwell Health. And I'll get into a little more detail of each of these programs. But we also have Cold Spring Harbor. We have Stony Brook here where I am, and Brookhaven National Labs. And our 2 incubators are LIDE, the Long Island High Technology Incubator, and the Broad Hollow Bioscience Park. So next page. So I work at so that's the synopsis. You can go to the next slide then. So I work at the Center for Biotechnology, which is a New York State organization. We focus on helping very early stage technologies and early stage companies We usually go up until trying to get the companies into a Series A. We offer non-dilutive funding. We've partnered with several federal agencies to receive that funding and disperse it. So NIH, or NIH Reach Commercialization Hub was one of our most recent projects that we did. So we focus a lot on looking at these early stage technologies, figuring out a business plan, putting in some really early stage funding to de-risk it, and then starting a company. And then we support those companies along the way. So we also offer some educational programming as part of our role here at Stony Brook University. So we teach fundamentals of bioscience industry to students that might not know anything about what happens actually in pharma and big biotech, but they're PhD students or graduate students or postdocs. We also work on a little bit of policy work to try to make sure that Long Island is recognized and grows as a bioscience hub. And I'm going to put in a little plug for our conference coming up next week. It's the annual Life Sciences Summit. That's November 9th through 10th, and that's our annual investors conference. So like I said, we formed this Long Island Bioscience Hub. We try to unite all the academic centers here on the island. And I'll go through a little bit about what each one does and what each one's specialties is. So first, I think we're starting on the west end with the Feinstein Institute. If you go to the next slide. So they're a leader. Like I said, they're part of the Northwell Health hospital system. They're world leaders in bioelectronic medicine, which is using electricity to activate nerves to treat disease, which is a huge growing next generation area. They do a lot of work also in inflammation and neuroscience. Let's go ahead and go to the next page. One of the other things I want to point out is they're in the top 6 percentile for receiving an NIH grant. So they're very active in very impactful research. Next is the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. They're recognized as an NIH Cancer Institute. They also do a lot of quantitative and cancer biology, and they're experts in genomics. They also do a lot in plant and neuroscience as well. And if you go to the next slide, they've spun out quite a few companies that are located either within our own incubators here on Long Island, or they've moved on to the city, which is kind of how you graduate from Long Island. So here's a representation of some of those companies. And then if you go to the next slide, we'll get to Stony Brook. So it's been around since 1957. It's constantly ranked one of the top 1% of universities worldwide. We've had 3 Nobel Prizes come out of here, so we're quite prolific. And there are quite a few students. And we're also one of only 7 national universities to manage a national laboratory, which we'll talk about next, which is Brookhaven National Laboratory. So if you go to the next slide. So Brookhaven is actually a federally funded laboratories. It's established by the Department of Energy. They've had 7 Nobel Prizes come out of theirs, and they've got tons of researchers. They've released a few major products that I'm sure you've heard of, including levodopa. So that's Brookhaven National Labs, and they have quite a few core facilities that a lot of our companies take advantage of also. And that's one of the advantages actually of all these universities here on the island, is they have lots of very highly specialized equipment that early stage companies can take advantage of and use for pretty low cost. And they don't need to take all the capital expenses to develop their own resources. So going on to the incubators, our next slide, it should be LIDE, the Long Island High Technology Incubator. So we were one of the co-founders of that. It's housed on a little bit of a carve out here on Stony Brook's campus. It's connected to the medical center. It has an Incubator Without Walls program. And again, like I said, it gives you access to all of the resources at Stony Brook University and the hospital. So that's a major advantage to a system like that. Next slide is the Broad Hollow Bioscience Park. So that's some of the companies. It's like some of the slides are messed up. But we have quite a few companies housed there. 2 of them actually are publicly listed now on the NASDAQ. So we have quite a little bit of a range of companies, from very nascent startups to a little bit older companies that might be looking for more space to grow into. Next slide should be Bioscience Park. Right. So they're also a not-for-profit corporation. They're managed by the Feinstein Institute in Cold Spring Harbor and a few other entities here on Long Island. Like I pointed out, they also have vivariums, so they have animal labs. They provide a lot of shared equipment, which is pretty integral, as I think it's been a common message in quite a few of these presentations today. And it's closer to the city. So we're about 2 hours from the city all the way out here. Farmingdale's only about an hour. Next slide. That should be our contact information, right? So if you want to contact any of these institutions, here are some emails. I recommend you reach out to any of them or to me if you want more information. Thank you very much.
Terrific. So I wasn't aware of all of the activity going on in Long Island. As Eva told me the other day, Brooklyn and they're all on the same island. I didn't really, I always, in my mind, had them in completely different places because I usually go on public transportation to Brooklyn and I drive to Long Island. So
it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just amazing the amount of research institutions that are there and the amount of commercial activity that's being generated there as well. You know, this is something that kind of flies under the radar and you don't really hear about it much. So you just received a $50 million grant from the city. What are you going to do with it?
We're building up more space at Biotech. Our companies are doing so fantastic. They're outgrowing the incubator. They desperately need space. And you know, we have companies not just from our incubator or from around the city. You know, Regional, for instance, from Switzerland, Cortec then is from France. I mean, we have international companies. So it's really, I mean, everybody is getting very, very interested in doing their own manufacturing. And we're really seeing a number, we have 3 companies now that have their own GMP facilities.
Yeah, that's really a trend.
Actually, that's something I'll point out about Long Island, if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So we actually have, I've got an echo now all of a sudden, but we actually have quite a few generic pharmaceutical manufacturing companies here on Long Island. So we have quite a bit of GMP facility space too that I didn't even cover.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really, well, that's where the technology is going, gene and cell therapy, right? And all of the promise that that offers for treating diseases. So will you be issuing an RFP?
Yes, we will be.
Okay, so stay tuned. All right, anyone have any questions? Okay, well, thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it.